September 28, a hurricane with sustained winds of 155 miles per hour is off the coast of Lee County, Florida. Projected to make landfall in the Tampa area, nobody in Southwest Florida had enough time to make proper plans. By the time most people knew the scale of the hurricane we were facing, it was too late to get out of its path. In the past, evacuation orders had failed to reach their potential, so many people didn't respect the orders to leave areas along the coast. The evacuation orders by Lee County officials may have been the only real sign people got of the destruction that was heading their way. When many people knew the scale of the hurricane and the magnitude of what was coming, it was too late to evacuate or move anywhere else. You had to stay and fight the storm. 125 people, over 5,000 homes destroyed in Lee County, over 350,000 vehicles. The first place to feel the impacts were the southern coast of Southwest Florida, Choccolosky and Everglades City, where the locals tried to put vehicles and boats on the high ground of the island. You can see here where the storm surge came, just to the peak of the hill. Everything in Choccolosky and Everglades City that was below that point, including the only ways in and out of the cities, were completely underwater. What was left was a path of destruction from storm surge flooding, but luckily the winds here were not very powerful. Everglades City was the seat of Collier County, but in the 1960s, Hurricane Donna changed that, and it was moved into further safer inland Naples, Florida. The Isles of Capri and Marco Island also received a brunt of storm surge that destroyed many homes and vehicles, leaving boats stranded in the mangrove around the islands. Most of Marco Island only received minor storm surge flooding, but other areas like the Isles of Capri with lower elevations before the current flood zone raising the elevation requirements, these areas that were lower lying in older neighborhoods around Marco Island suffered greatly. The storm surge went far beyond the coastal barrier islands and reached as far as US 41, leaving these coastal communities completely incommunicated from the rest of the state underneath the storm surge of Hurricane Ian. However, as you move further along the coast into Naples and Fort Myers, the storm surge grew bigger and more powerful. Eventually, the storm surge would not only flood the insides of homes, it would just about cover them. The storm surge would hit levels that were unbelievable to the imagination of anybody who's ever lived in Florida, leaving destruction in Marco Island. Moving into Naples, the iconic pier was completely destroyed. The storm surge would make it as far as US 41 in south central Fort Myers. Before it got dark, the ocean in Naples kept creeping and creeping in, leaving many people who could not believe the evacuation orders finding their homes surrounded by water. Perhaps even the people in Southwest Florida were not aware of what was happening around them. A boat here that was found on Wiggins Pass Road was about 1 mile from the water. The ocean came up the Cocohatchee River, pushing boats far inland, and as the storm surge kept on rising, many people were not aware what was going on in the coastal communities. Before the winds even picked up in northern Lee County and Charlotte County, the storm surge was already working its way into Naples neighborhoods, leaving many people trapped in their homes, and others along the coast had water as high as their windows. Soon, the water would reach close to the ceilings in homes in Naples along the coast. We entered along Gulf Coast Drive, right after the storm surge had receded, and were able to confirm that the frantic phone calls we got from family members that stayed in this area were by far not exaggerations, but accurate descriptions of what was going on in Naples. The ocean had made it as far as people's homes. Boats were on land, vehicles were in the water, and homes were completely destroyed. The path of destruction that Hurricane Ian left along the Gulf Coast of Naples changed the place forever. Palm trees would die, the grass would disappear, and the complete destruction of what was once one of the most beautiful cities in America would be forever changed by an unbelievable storm surge. In downtown Naples, water was inside of the buildings in the historic and famous Fifth Avenue. In other parts of Naples, boats were on land and vehicles were in the water. On display, the destruction of the toys of the wealthy. One of the most affluent and beautiful coastlines in the United States now lay in ruins, covered in debris, sand, and destruction. Boats and vehicles, the personal items of the most exclusive properties, now lay in ruins. Further into Naples, the damages were minimal. Anything in the path of the storm surge would have to rot and be destroyed forever. No vehicle or personal item that is touched by storm surge water will be able to endure the corrosion that would soon follow. Many people in Naples would find their property to be completely destroyed. Boat docks were moved from their places and boats pushed far inland from their original location. However, despite the damage in Naples, these are mostly wealthy areas and second homes. The city of Bonita Springs did not fare better. Anything north of Bonita Beach Road is where the hurricane storm surge took a level unbelievable. Between 10 to 12 foot high, the storm surge left houses completely covered, sand several feet deep, and a storm surge that destroyed everything in its path. The storm surge up the Caloosahatchee River and the Imperial River in Bonita Springs pushed storm surge into neighborhoods of normal working class people, while the vast majority of the destruction was in areas that were exclusively for the wealthy. These two rivers pushed storm surge into areas where the normal working class people, not just their vacation homes, were ruined. Even months after Hurricane Ian passed, debris from Bonita Springs continues to flow into the Gulf of Mexico. The destruction that Bonita Springs and Bonita Beach suffered were unlike anything imaginable. Further inland into Lee County, places like Suncoast Estates, where people are only living in mobile homes, these are poor areas that are not going to be able to recover. These are places where people have put their life savings into buying a property. These are not the rich people along the coast that are going to be able to rebuild. And in fact, some of the most heartbreaking scenes out of Hurricane Ian is not the destruction along the coast of the rich people, but the normal people of Southwest Florida. San Carlos Island, right behind Fort Myers Beach, was worse hit than anywhere else, as here there were mobile homes lined up along the beach. The historic center of Fort Myers Beach, vacation destination for millions of people, would never again be the same. The storm surge here in Fort Myers Beach was the highest of anywhere along the coast, and buildings here were completely destroyed. The body count higher than 50, many of whom were trapped in vehicles as they tried to escape in the last moment. In the future, the people of Southwest Florida would do a better job to listen to evacuation orders. By the time people realized the oncoming storm surge, it was too late to escape. In Fort Myers Beach, entire homes were never to be seen again. Only the land would be left. Many, realizing their mistake, too late to change anything about it, had no chance to escape, what took place in Fort Myers Beach. Entire homes, entire buildings were swept away, never to be seen. And while everybody had heard about storm surge, none of the hurricanes had been able to destroy places like the iconic Sanibel Lighthouse, the fishing piers in Bokelia. Even further, the famous Fort Myers Beach Pier would never be seen again, and the Cape Romano dome houses, an iconic piece of Naples, gone. The Sanibel Causeway was wiped away, which means access to an entire island was diminished to nothing. Fort Myers Beach was impassable for many weeks, and only some people were allowed back on the island once these roads were opened. Once we were able to enter Fort Myers Beach, the places that we had come to know and love would never again be the same. Hurricane Ian changed Fort Myers Beach forever. Never again would Fort Myers Beach be exactly what it was before. It would all have to be rebuilt completely, a task that many people felt was almost impossible. And as time went by, more efforts to clean up, open roads, and see the full scale of what took place here, even less hope was left that Fort Myers Beach would able to be once again the place it once was. But the storm surge did not just stop in Fort Myers Beach. It forced its way up San Carlos and did a massive destruction to South Fort Myers, where many homes were just washed away into the ocean, and others further inland, protected by the mangroves, still had between 4 to 6 feet of water inside of them. These are the untold stories of the people that weren't on the news. We got to see the boats that floated off into the roads, but little did the news cover on the real people of South Fort Myers that, despite being many miles inland, had the storm surge go right into their homes. And these are not the rich people along the coast. These are the people that have regular jobs and live paycheck to paycheck. People that, when they found out everything was gone, had a very strange reaction. Imagine going to check on somebody's property and telling that person there's nothing to come back to. And the person replies, "I'll see what I can save." And you have to go on to explain to that person that there is nothing to save. A lot of people were not able to deal with the emotional stress of the few things they had being completely gone. And in the time following Hurricane Ian, Southwest Florida became a dreadful place, a place of sadness, a place of anger, a place of frustration, where people felt like everything they had was taken away from them, including a place to sleep and their dignity. We were beginning to see tents pop up, people living in cars, waiting for FEMA with absolutely no real hope of any outside help, until people came to the conclusion that they were on their own. Many set up tents outside what were once their homes, others moved to other places with family and friends. But the reality of setting into the notion that whatever your life was before the hurricane was wiped away in one single day, and going back to that life was no longer possible. Some people walked away right away and understood their lives were never going to be the same, but other people stayed behind, living for perhaps maybe even for months, a nightmare, trying to cope with their new surroundings and the notion that the life that they once had would never be the same. The images of downtown Fort Myers and the piers that were gone circulated around the entire world as news crews from the United States and from other countries came to showcase the iconic landmarks that were now gone, like the boat docks in the city of Fort Myers. The real stories of the people that were left behind to suffer were never really broadcast for people to see. And even to this day, many people have not been able to get their lives back together. But these images of misery and human suffering are not the images that the rich people who are going to come back and rebuild in a few months want to see or know about. Therefore, the struggle of the real people of Southwest Florida, the people in the mobile home parks in Suncoast Estates, the people in Lee County who are not able to rebuild, who have to depend on friends and organizations to get their lives back together. Or like the images we're looking at here from Pine Island. On this island, where agriculture is one of the major sources of income for people, mobile homes that were likely not insured because of their age were completely gone, and many people had to restart their lives from absolutely nothing. But these are the places in Southwest Florida that you're not going to find on the news. Their stories and their situations, those that have absolutely no easy outcome. The nurseries and plants on the island would be destroyed on a scale unimaginable to the people who planted them. The destruction of the storm surge would stop right here at the Bokeelia Pier. Beyond this point, the storm surge was just as unexpectedly terminated as it was started. From here forward, the storm surge was not the biggest destruction, but it was the winds that ripped through Charlotte County that really left a toll on the communities. Most of the newer homes in Lee County, Florida are up to a new building code, but these older homes from the 70s and beyond were not up to the task of holding up to the winds that would push through Charlotte County, leaving entire neighborhoods with about 80% of the homes with roof damage. This is not exactly a rich area, but it's also not a poor area. And the areas along the Mayaka River also suffered incredible flooding. But for the most part, it wasn't the flooding that destroyed properties along Charlotte County. It was the strong winds that destroyed homes, businesses, and left the city of Northport and Port Charlotte in a condition difficult to believe. Punta Gorda fared better off since most of the construction there is newer, but the mobile home parks pushing inland as far as Fort Ogden suffered greatly. Many of Florida's infrastructure weaknesses were highlighted as many of the seawalls in Charlotte County simply fell into the water. Many of the bridges went into the water. Many of the homes were destroyed because they were older and not fit for hurricanes. In fact, Northport and Port Charlotte, this entire area of Charlotte County, was able to feel the brunt of this hurricane and expose many of the weaknesses that Florida has when dealing with these massive hurricanes that are common. One great example being there are not enough landfills. On our YouTube channel, we have discussed this problem in the past, and Hurricane Ian highlighted the fact that many of these counties don't have in place sufficient landfills or access to landfills when there's a natural disaster, leaving many counties like Lee and Charlotte having to scramble to find solutions in the last minute, and many of the poor communities forgotten with garbage for much longer than was sanitarily possible. However, in the most part, Southwest Florida had to figure out faster than ever. In the past, the power of social media was not able to deter officials from being able to simply overlook the poverty-stricken communities. Was not possible anymore for these officials, who in the past were able to overlook these areas and take as long as they wanted to find a solution. But with Hurricane Ian, they had to scramble to pick up every last piece of destruction as soon as possible, because these days social media gave people the power to have their voices heard immediately. The power of social media to showcase immediately what was going on the ground meant that officials had to scramble to clean up the mess as soon as possible for everybody, not just their associates. And a cleanup effort unlike none that had ever taken place and on a speed that had never taken place was undertaken simply because there was too much on the line to lose for those officials. For those places like Fort Myers Shores, you could see clearly the line of mode as far as how high the water had reached and the debris piles that were left a few months later. These communities like Fort Myers Shores are not exactly rich, but as the storm surge from the Caloosahatchee River pushed east of 75, communities that perhaps never thought they would be affected by a storm surge found their entire neighborhoods completely changed forever. With many people here being elderly or out of state at the time, it meant that the debris piles would unavoidably take months to clean up. Now the attention turns to the ecological impact that all this debris would have. Would the animals and the ecosystems and the estuaries be able to put up with all the contamination that was put back into nature? Would the dolphins and other marine creatures continue to be seen in Southwest Florida? How would so much paint, fertilizer, and all types of human waste that was put into these waterways affect the nature? Would the animals come back? The red tide now became a huge concern, and unfortunately for Southwest Florida, Hurricane Ian would go on to unleash some of the worst red tide we have ever seen in the state. The red tide is a naturally occurring process. However, events like hurricanes that bring contamination into the water only aggravate it on levels never seen before. And with this hurricane, realtors were the first to exploit the situation. While many people feared that Southwest Florida would not be able to bounce back, from realtors to car dealerships, there was so much money to be made with the cleanup efforts and the sales of vehicles, new homes, that while this was a destruction and a bad for many, it was a great outcome for a lot of people. The tourists, for one, continued to flock to the Naples Pier even though it was closed. And let's be honest, the beaches of Naples are beautiful even after the pier's gone and destruction. That will not stop the beautiful sunsets, the warm weather, and the downtown Naples area that at one point had 2 to 3 feet of water is now packed with activity. And as the cold weather pushes in, people are not going to stop coming to Florida to enjoy the weather. And in fact, places like Naples have made a huge, quick recovery. While some of the ecological effects we're going to be dealing with for a long time, nothing can stop Southwest Florida. When it gets cold up north, people are going to come here. When people are tired of living in places that don't have the same vibes, even though for now Southwest Florida is not what it used to be, it's still Southwest Florida. And it's beautiful to see Southwest Florida bounce back and recover. Beautiful places like Naples are in full action, almost as beautiful as they were before, and Fort Myers Beach might take a few years to be what it once was. The garbage is cleaned up. The only question that remains now is what will happen to our environment. Will the red tide diminish, or will it continue to stick around in Southwest Florida for unprecedented periods of time? Some of the effects of this hurricane change people's lives forever. Hurricanes can bring out the best in people, like empathy and compassion and the desire to help other people. But for others, it can also bring greed and the desire of doing bad to full completion. In the days after the hurricane, we started to hear reports of people looting, some coming as far away as other states in organized groups with no other purpose in mind but to plunder what was left of people's possessions. While the vast majority of us were touched by the situations these people were going through, some people actually found it in themselves as an opportunity to take advantage of these people's situation. Some people did it in entrepreneurship and with the desire to help other people, like those who have junk removal services and cleanup efforts. Others that went out there to loot and to steal the few things some people had left. These people being the lowest scum around. However, many of the insurance companies that have been building wealth thanks to the services they were supposed to render to South Florida seemed to also just disappear when they were needed the most. And one of the saddest thing about hurricanes is seeing how if you broke your left foot, they only cover your right. And many people who thought their homes were covered by insurances are now finding out that the insurance policies that they thought would cover them were ineffective. Others who waited for FEMA help also found out that while some people who perhaps didn't deserve these benefits obtained them, a lot of people who needed it did not. And thus, many injustices were to take place right after Hurricane Ian, not caused by the destruction of nature, but by the inadequacy of some people to carry out justice on their fellow men. Natural disasters sometimes destroy and turn our lives around, but in these changes, we're able to find what really matters. Sometimes people and situations are removed from us that were going to lead us nowhere, and new doors are opened out of this destruction to give us a better future. And while a lot of people lost everything they had, others were able to reinvent themselves bigger and better than they were before. Hurricanes are a flip of the fortunes, bringing destruction to some and opportunities to others that were not present before.